Good day. Does anyone remember what we used to say about the 4 fat-soluble vitamins and what they were and what they represented? That's what we've been doing today.
Yes, it
We
has.
say that, hello, Scott Laird, Jodi Laird, welcome to Laird Wellness live. Oh, there we are. Okay.
We are live.
There we are live. Okay, so what we normally do is we talk about fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins and to our clients, and we say a good way to remember that is that the oil-based ones are A, D, E, and K. And I create a little acronym that says ADEC. What do you stain a deck with? Oil. That's stain ADEC. A-D, you get it. So that's what we've been doing all day today. So if we appear a little tired, that's why.
We've been up to our eyeballs
my gosh.
Oil and A-D.
E and K.
E and K.
Yeah.
Staining a deck.
And Thompson's water seal, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So tonight we are going to talk about something that is really cool. We're going to show an interview I did with Dr. Tom Lewis. Dr. Tom Lewis does our blood testing for our Biologic Blueprint program. And the interview you're going to see is before we join forces. And so I asked him all about his blood test that can determine your future health. See, this is really cool because usually when you have a blood test, the parameters on that blood test tell you that there's already something wrong. Like I was telling Jodi, I wish my Prius was more like the blood test, because my Prius, if you own a Prius, you know this. Everything runs perfect. It's wonderful. Nothing ever goes wrong. And then one day you get this little red caution sign on your dashboard. Ding, 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 ding.
That's
and it's like
the worst.
Big red. Everything else goes black. Sometimes the car even just stops and it's like everything is like gone. And you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? And sometimes it's as little as, like there's an oxygen sensor that's not firing right or something. So,
right.
But it's really alarming. And so it doesn't give you little codes along the way. I wish it said, little things like, hey, your temperature's up a little bit. This may wear your hoses and belts or something in about 6 months. You may want to think about it. Instead, it's just like, boom, something happened. And that's the way most blood tests are now, at least in the medical world. They show you the reference interval, as it were, as to what they think is a healthy range for a thyroid or C-reactive protein or an A1C or your cholesterol or something like that. And they say, this is the range you need to be in, when really it's not that way. If you're within that range, like what was it the other day? We were looking at something that was just is an astronomical number on one of the tests. And I looked at that and went, oh my gosh, if we let people go to that level, they would be in serious trouble. When really functional medicine looks at a very small window within that reference interval, or maybe right even outside of that reference interval, to say, hey, there's something not quite right here. The medical establishment may say, it's fine, you're okay, but it's fine and you're okay if you want to be doing the drugs and enter that whole world and be in trouble and have to do medical procedures and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you want to avoid all that, that's where you kind of want a different kind of test. And that's what we're going to talk to you tonight about, how to predict your future health. And that's exactly what the test from Dr. Tom Lewis does. It predicts your future health, because you look at it and you can say, oh, if I let this C-reactive protein go for too long at this level, this smoldering level, as Dr. Tom Lewis would call it, it's going to spark into a flame sooner or later. It's kind of like leaving a smoldering fire in the forest and saying, oh, nothing's ever going to happen. And before you know it, there's a 1,000-acre fire going on.
Right.
So and that's exactly kind of the scenario inside your body. So tonight we're going to learn from Dr. Lewis about this test. But first, we wanted to show you something that's very special that we are doing. This is Oxymist. What is Oxymist? Oxymist is hypochlorous acid.
Yes.
And we're having a sale on it, 50% off. We haven't overstocked. Thanks very much to Dr. Tom Lokensgaard, who this is who we get this from. And he gave us a whole bunch of it. And he said, do a sale with it or something like that. So that's what we're doing. We're going to honor what he's doing for you. He's giving this to you at 50% off. It's Oxymist, HOCl. So first of all, what is HOCl? HOCl has become very popular in the last year because of a certain thing flying around. And we're not going to say what that certain thing is. You know what I'm talking about, okay? So what happened was that, now, first of all, let's clarify that oxymist is 100 parts per million of hypochlorous acid. It is licensed for a facial mist. It will beautify skin, help minimize the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. Jodi actually uses it for this purpose.
Yep.
And it's ideal for dry skin, soothes minor skin irritations and scarring. And as a matter of fact, I cut myself shaving. You know, us bald guys have to shave our heads. And we used this the other day. Mm-hmm. And remember how vicious, like I cut a strip off my head like this big. It was awful. And I sprayed this right on right after. Now take a look at it. It's on the back.
Yeah.
You can't see it.
Oh my gosh.
But Jodi can see it.
No, for real.
It's not there anymore, is it?
For real, it looks great.
It's gone, yeah, because
wow.
I shaved my head tonight just before the show, and I thought, oh man, I'm going to risk, this is going to hurt. And I got closer and closer, and I went, I don't feel anything.
Like literally, it's only been 4 days.
Yeah, I know. And I was going to like, okay, and I shaved some more, and I felt my head like, surely I'm bleeding. Nope, nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, that worked really good.
Yeah.
So for scarring, for if you're bleeding, if something just happened, like you cut yourself, put this on it, works great. That's what it's licensed for. Now, hypochlorous acid, I encourage you to do your research. Go online. There are many different other uses if you choose to do so with it. Extremely, extremely important uses for it. So, look up hypochlorous acid, HOCl. Just Google HOCl, and you will find all kinds of other uses for it. However, oxymist is licensed for the skin.
Yes.
Got it? Got it. Okay.
And I love it for the skin. So
and it does work for the skin great too.
I cleanse my face twice a day, and then I spray that on my skin right after I cleanse. Okay. And then I put moisturizer on. Beautiful. And a few other things. Okay. So it's a part of my skincare routine every day. Yep. It's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. So now we are going to get into the interview now with Dr. Tom Lewis. I invite you to pay attention. This is really, really important stuff. It's really cool what this blood test can do. And it can really tell you your future health or what risks you are in the future and how you can avoid them. And actually, you can see how you can get this test as well. Yeah. So keep looking at the screen, keep watching, and you will see how that is possible for you. So without further ado, let's get to the interview with Dr. Tom Lewis.
Dr. Tom Lewis holds a PhD from MIT and continuing education from the Harvard School of Public Health. His father developed Alzheimer's 20 years ago, and since then he has dedicated his life to determining how to better predict Alzheimer's and chronic diseases in general. Working with key clinicians at Harvard Medical School, his team developed advanced artificial intelligence AI-driven algorithms to predict a person's mortality risk in both the near and distant future. And part of this algorithm is predicting your chance of developing major chronic diseases with a diagnostic protocol he calls the 4 dimensions of health. Dr. Tom Lewis, welcome to the Health Awakening.
Thank you, Scott. A pleasure to be here and discuss the continuum of health theory that we've developed.
This is fascinating. We were talking before the cameras came on, and I think everyone would love to know what you're working on here and where it's at. So first of all, what are we talking about here when we talk about the 4 dimensions of health?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we have to realize is that, nobody wants to get sick and have a diagnosis. But a diagnosis is extremely artificial. There are 69,000 ICD-10 codes for diagnoses. But really, if you look at COVID teaches us a lot. People with cardiovascular disease have 1,200% higher mortality rates compared to someone who's healthy. Yet some people with cardiovascular disease don't die from COVID. So that just shows you that there's a great difference in the severity of the disease, of cardiovascular disease, as reflected by COVID. So it points to the fact that not everybody is alike. And in fact, we all lie on a health disease continuum. And what's interesting about this concept is, there's the most healthy person in the world over here and someone who's just about to die, sadly, and everybody else is somewhere in between. And so, the diagnosis is some artificial point on that continuum line. But, you don't just suddenly develop a heart attack. You get matriculated over 20, 30 years. So what we do is we place very accurately through a variety of measurement techniques where you are on the overall health disease continuum. And that's really what our whole algorithm is about.
Okay. So there are 4 pieces to this. There's risk is one of them, physiological, pathology, and chronic disease. Is that right?
Right, and they all overlap. So, for example, very, very rarely does a condition erupt without risk factors. And it could be your genetics, it could be where you're born, your mom and dad, so that, some of these risk factors are a little more subtle. But it's very simple. Risks beget physiological changes if they are sustained long enough. Physiological changes, if adverse long enough, lead to pathological changes, tissue changes. And when pathological changes, tissue changes progress enough, at some point a doctor will call that a disease. So, I think it sounds pretty simple, right? But those are the continuums. And what we do is we measure where you are on the risk continuum, on the physiology or blood continuum, pathology continuum, and disease continuum very accurately and give you a score. And it's sort of like losing weight. You want to lose 20 pounds. Well, we want you to lose 20 points on where you are in an adverse position on the health disease continuum. And when you do that, miraculous things starts happening with our people.
So explain the protocols you've developed to help a person reduce their risk and their burden here along this. Once they get a score, I guess the question is then, okay, well, now what? What do I do?
Well, since it all starts with risks, that's where we start. So we run a very robust survey. And it's based on a functional medicine intake survey, because when a functional doctor wants to see you, the first thing they're going to do is ask a whole bunch of questions to clear the air and get a really good understanding for where you lie on, what your risk portfolio, I call it, looks like, or where you are on the risk continuum. So what we've done is we've taken, say, Cleveland Clinic's functional intake form and others, and we created a whole library of questions, and then did, with a focus group of doctors, determine which ones we think are of the highest impact to a person's health. And so we built this survey, and what we then have done is we put a risk score to every single question and answer. And that's how we place you on a continuum, through a numeric score from the body of all these question and answers and their risk scores. And then we produce a very simplified color-coded report. So if you can read your child's grades, the report card, you can read this, and very quickly you can see, oh, math, he has a D, and English, he has an A. Okay, we're going to focus on math. So what our risk continuum report does is gives us a color coding of the highest to lowest risks, and the plan just falls out of that. So we have AI that says, okay, if you have constipation, you go down this path, you get enrolled in our our gut health online learning program, and you have a consult with a coach that works on explaining what constipation really is. It's a malabsorption or a slow or improper digestive process. And, since you are what you absorb, not what you eat, that becomes really important for health. So you can do the online program, or you can work with a practitioner, doctor, naturopath, or health coach. So we have all those pieces.
All right. Well, we're talking about the 4 dimensions of health with Dr. Tom Lewis. We'll be right back with more from The Health Awakening. Stay with us. And welcome back to The Health Awakening. Before the break, we were talking with our guest, Dr. Tom Lewis, about the 4 dimensions of health. And Dr. Tom, you mentioned something about the risk continuum, and that we have a score. You score people according to these parameters. So now, how do we know that this is a correct score, as it were? Because it seems pretty subjective. So how does that work?
Well, that's a great question, Scott. And just to review, we use a functional intake form, and every question and answer has a risk score tied to it. But we can change that risk score as we gather data. So what we've done on about 1,000 people now is we've run the survey, and we get the risk score, and we had a presumption about what the magnitude of the risk, it's subjective, is on each question and answer. But then on that 1,000 people, we also ran our labs. And I'd like to just go over our labs. So that would be the continuum dimension 2 or continuum 2, your physiological continuum. And it's really important to understand how we differentiate ourselves from the standard of care, and how this is then used to make sure that our risk estimate is correct. So, for example, the standard of care, if you get a lab test from your doctor and it was Quest, LabCorp, whatever, the labs are, you get your value, and then you're given what's called a reference range or reference interval. And so, for example, a lab test online says that, the normal reference interval can be different from lab to lab. How can that be? We're based on, common physiology. And it doesn't mean if you're out of range that you're sick, or if you're in range that you're healthy. So in other words, the reference interval is rather meaningless. So Dr. Tremp at Harvard, he said, look, Tom, the only thing that really matters to people, are they going to die young? Are they going to have premature mortality? And then when you titrate back from premature mortality, then people who die younger generally have a lot lower quality of life because they have comorbid diseases and all that. So mortality is the thing in a study you can study really well. So what we did in our labs, and there's 21 labs in our measurement of where you are in the physiological continuum, and we call that single value where you are in the continuum, your chronic disease temperature, kind of correlating with your internal temperature if you're sick, and nobody wants their child above 98.6, so we use that metric. But how we got to the values is we did a tediously exhaustive study of the literature to look at, say, a marker like C-reactive protein or white blood cell counts, to see where the literature, the research is showing the first inkling of an increase in premature death in the population they study. So that is our endpoint. And when you do that for a biomarker, you find out that the range of normal or optimal, where there's no increase in mortality, is extremely tight compared to the reference intervals. And that's why people die suddenly and we say, why'd that guy die? Their labs were normal. Well, in the standard of care, the labs are for, are you really sick, really? Whereas in functional medicine, and really in all medicine, we should be looking for the smoldering, the earliest signs of, the labs being out of whack. So let me just give you an example. The Women's Health Initiative, 65,000 women at Harvard and other institutions followed prospectively. In other words, they measure them and they track these people and they measure them again. Well, if you have two sets of women, one with a white blood cell count of 4,700, and a white blood cell count costs like $1 to get in a lab, with at a hospital, really. They charge you like 25, and then you have another group at 6,700. 4,700, 6,700. Guess what the upper limit is in the standard of care? It's around 11,000. So the 6,700 is way normal. And you follow these women for 6 years, 50% more of the ones at 6,700 are dead compared to the ones at 4,700. Yet you're completely normal. So we've developed our risk scale based on this kind of great data. And it turns out that as you leave the range for white blood cell counts, for example, between 4,000 and 5,800, the risk increases in a log linear way, sort of like an exponential. Like try to run a 12-second 100-yard dash. It's really hard. But you could run a 30 easy, and maybe you could train to get to a 20. Then all of a sudden it starts escalating. That's how nature works, and that's how we've based our parameters. So getting back to the risk factors, so we consider the labs and how we quantify and measure your risk relatively objective. As objective as we can get in medicine, considering, we're complex. It's not like a computer chip, okay? We're more complex than that. But the labs we feel are very accurate. Matter of fact, there was a great book written around 2000 called Your Blood Doesn't Lie. And it's true. So the blood results is our master. And then we've used AI iteratively to look at our risk scoring for the subject of the survey. And we have used the data that we're generating from the people that are taking both the survey and the labs to improve the scoring, because basically there should be a linear relationship between the lab composite value and your risk composite value.
Okay, well, we're talking about the 4 dimensions of health, and next we're going to talk about how you can get this test from Dr. Tom Lewis. We'll be right back with more from The Health Awakening.
All right, so there you go. There's Dr. Tom Lewis talking about his chronic disease temperature test. It's really quite amazing. He has actually patented that process. So all of the test parameters, they're not patented, but the way he puts them together and the way he comes up with your risk score and all that is patented, and it should be because it's absolutely amazing.
Brilliant, really.
It is. I mean, Jodi, we looked at your cholesterol the other day, and we were kind of concerned because it was a little higher than, that standard of care again. And when you see something above that, you were nervous, right? It's
well,
it scares you.
I was vegan for 12 years, and so my cholesterol was actually really low for 12 years. Then, I went pretty much predominantly keto for my thyroid to heal some things that were going on in my body. And so I upped my oils and I upped my meat consumption, so my cholesterol went up, which we do need.
Yep.
But, that mindset has to shift. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to say that we thought it was out of range because now here's the thing where instead of being in range, too wide of a range that we talked about before, this time it was, the standard of care is too low. So they say, if you're above 200 cholesterol, you're above normal. Oh my gosh, you've got to do something. Statins, all this kind of stuff. Well, Jodi's was at 298. Mm-hmm. You might go, oh man, that's high. Well, we talked to Dr. Lewis about it because even we were confused. We went, well, is that high or isn't it? I mean, so we talked to him, and sure enough, he says, no. He says that you're right in range. It's for optimal health. People who have lower cholesterol are actually at higher risk for all kinds of things because you don't have what your body needs to, like Jodi was saying, transport the nutrients all around the body. That's what cholesterol does. Mm-hmm. Right. It's like it takes all of the fat-soluble nutrients around the body like a taxi. So if you don't have enough cholesterol, it's like disabling your taxi or giving it a flat tire or something. It can't make it around the body, and then, of course, all kinds of mayhem happens. So it's better to have a little higher cholesterol because you need it. Right. So isn't that interesting?
But high cholesterol with the right foods. So
right.
Good oils, good fats, good meats, lots of veggies.
And what are good foods? It's so hard to, some people will send us a label and say, I did pretty good. Take a look at this. And we'll take a look at the label and went, oh boy, we need to teach some more. But some people do really good. They listen and then they go to the store and that's the main thing we need to teach people is turn the label around. That's where it begins, right? You turn the label around, you read the ingredients, and then you really know what you're up against. And so, Dr. Tom's program is so great that we added it to our program. So that's the blood test that we use in the Biologic Blueprint program. You've heard us talk about it 1,000 times. And then we decided, it'd be even better is to have a test at the beginning and then a test at the end to see how you did in between, right? And so that's what we've done now. So let me take a look at this here. This is our new program. So you get an initial blood test and consult with Dr. Lewis, and then you look at the very bottom of that list. You get a follow-up blood test and consult with Dr. Lewis. And so you get to talk to Dr. Lewis twice and have his patented test with our program. And then in between, long story short, Jodi and I teach you what to do based on what your blood test said so that you can have better results on the other end of it. And then you'll also get lots of equipment. You'll get a $100 gift card for anything at our store, all kinds of stuff. And then you get to talk to us once every 10 days as well. And we'll also have teachings in between that too.
Right.
We're doing private teachings. You know how we do Laird Wellness Live here? Well, how would you like to be part of just a private group where we're teaching some stuff that not everybody gets to see? Just those in our Biologic Blueprint group. So we basically do a private PowerPoint for about 10 people once every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We have another one coming up this Monday.
Yep.
We're going to do some health hacks, that kind of thing. Last time we did, what did we do last time?
Fats, actually.
We talked all about fats, the difference between saturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, all the different kinds
which ones to eat, which ones to stay away from.
Right, and what's good, what's not, what's all about coconut oil, what's this MCT oil stuff, and is it healthy, is it not? So we gave that as part of our program, and so you basically get private teachings every 2 weeks with our Biologic Blueprint program, in addition to meeting with Jodi and me personally every week in between those times. Mm-hmm. So you get all that stuff, you get the two tests from Dr. Lewis, etc. So all that kind of stuff. It's the Biologic Blueprint program. And if you want a free consultation, all you have to do is go to lairdwellness.com/blueprint. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. So here you go. lairdwellness.com/blueprint. When you go there, it's basically just a way to schedule in a call with me. So basically, book a time. You and I will talk for like half an hour. I'll tell you all about it, what's included, what's not, why maybe it fits for you. And you can decide at the end of the call whether you'd like to do it or not. No pressure, no obligation.
1st, right?
Yeah, we're going to start a new group June 1st. We already have a few people signed up. We have a father and a daughter signed up, which is really cool. And we have another guy doing this. And we got some more people coming on. And so if you'd like to do this, I encourage you to get on it now, because at a certain point, we kind of have to cut it off and say, okay, we can only handle so many people at a time. So if you want to be in that group, just go to lairdwellness.com/blueprint and you can be part of that group.
Yeah.
Very simple to do. And again, this is our perfected program. We did some beta programs to sort of put our feet in the water, and we had lots of people help us out with that. So thank you very much for those who did the program, got some results, and gave us some good feedback.
And you'll be hearing about them soon with all their testimonials. We're going to be putting them up on our website.
By the way, go to the Laird Wellness Facebook page, and you'll see a testimonial there right now from Paul. Yeah, Paul. Okay, yeah, he lost 25 pounds, and he's healthier, and he's eating better. But you know what? He's actually considering going off of his depression meds that he's been on for 20 years. Yeah. That's the cool part. That's the really neat breakthroughs that you can see when you change your diet and your lifestyle and get this blood test to know where you're at and what to do, because without that, you think you're stuck. I mean, Paul was on it for 20 years. He thought he was stuck for life.
Right.
Not necessarily. There are ways to get out, but the medical community doesn't know those paths to help you get out. We do. So go to lairdwellness.com/blueprint and you can find out all about it. Okay. Now we want to invite you to hop over to ShabbatNightLive.com. Tonight is another episode of Michael Rood's Rightly Dividing the Truth. This is basically how to study the Bible, don't screw it up, and don't get caught in the trap of religiosity. Just to read it for yourself, figure out what it means, and really stop and understand what it means. And if you stop and say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, you're probably right. A wise man once said, if you're the only one going left when everyone's going right, you're probably doing something better. So that's what Michael teaches tonight. It's a great show. So go to lairdwellness.com, or pardon me, Laird Wellness. You can go to lairdwellness.com/blueprint and book a time. But right now, we want you to go to ShabbatNightLive.com and watch Michael Rood. Thank you again, guys, for joining us. And we invite you to join us next time for another Laird Wellness Live. We'll see you.
Good night.